Hi, this is Rich Parker from Rich Parker Image. Today we're going to talk about making star trails. That's where you take a bunch of pictures of stars, you stack them together, and you put them out as one big colossal picture. I have an example here in the thumbnail. I'll give you an example. This probably won't work for you, but it'll give you a starting point. I start off with a very wide angle lens, specifically this bad boy right here. This is a Sigma 10-20 f3.5. It gives me lots of light and lots of clarity. It does add a little bit of blue to the picture, which actually I sort of like. You set up a basic exposure. What I usually do is something around f4, f4.5, ISO 400, so that it's fairly light sensitive. And I set 10-second exposures. If I shoot much over 10 seconds of exposure and I zoom in, I'm going to see dashes instead of dots where the stars are. So that's my personal suggestion. Now, this is on a crop sensor, so there's a whole bunch of math involved. What I suggest is you just use a starting point and tweak from there. So your first night's going to be all experiments. What I came up with was a 10-second exposure. So I set my intervalometer to press the button for 1 second and then wait 12. That gives the camera time to recycle, get it stored down into the card, everything else. Once I get it set up, I focus it to infinity. I throw it onto manual focus. I put it on manual settings so that it doesn't change anything overnight. And literally, right around 9 or 10 o'clock, I get it set up, make sure it's pointing where I want it to point, hit go, and I'm good for the night. Generally around 5 or 6 in the morning where sunrise comes up, then I've got to go and make sure the camera's shut down. So I just look at it once or twice to make sure it's taking pictures. But I have an east-facing porch from my apartment. So the bad news is it's from my apartment, which means there are going to be some city and street lights not too far away. I'm next to a river, so that means if it gets around freezing and it was above during the daytime, that means there's going to be a huge batch of fog when the temperature shifts over beneath freezing, or at least hits dew point. But the good news is I can take tons of these pictures. It's digital. We can delete what we don't need. So I had some fairly good luck last weekend, and what I did was I said, hey, you know what, Thanksgiving? Let's reproduce that if we can, and this time record it more carefully and share it with you all. And that's exactly what I've done. So as you can see from the thumbnail, we had a moderately nice success. With these settings, I let it run overnight. It took about 1,900 pictures in 6.5 hours. Now I had a battery grip so that it didn't run out of power, even though the batteries were in the cold. You put them in when they're completely charged at room temperature, and you can get close to 3,400 shots on an 80D with 2 good batteries. So that was plenty for overnight. I ended up with about 1,900 usable shots. That was a little over 6.4 hours. I'll show you the math as we get into it. Now I'm going to switch over to the computer. I'm going to do voiceover for the rest of this video, but I thought you'd like to at least say hi. Welcome back. Now I've already imported the files. There's 1,935 of them, and it probably took about 35 minutes to bring them in. It actually took longer to get them off the card. What I'm going to do, first of all, show you a quick development trip if you don't know this, especially for large batches. You simply go to the first picture and you develop it. So as you can see, I'm marking up the individual settings to clarify the lens, to add a little bit of sharpening, to add a little bit of noise reduction. These are all just standard things where you're doing some night shots around 400 or 800 ISO. You're going to get noise. This is how you fix it. Alright, I'm also going to play around just a teeny tiny bit with the exposure and the blacks. As you can see in the histogram up at the top, the blacks are lit up, and I just try and soften that a little bit, make it something that's a little bit easier to represent on more hardware. Last up, with any night shooting, make sure you kick up your clarity and your dehaze. You'd be surprised at what a nice effect that has on the night sky. So now you can see my clipping. It ain't completely gone, but it's pretty close. Next, we're going to propagate this setting to all the files all at once. It's not a huge process. You take that first picture, you switch back to library mode, you hit Control A, or on a Mac Command A. That selects all the pictures in your current import. Then right click on the first picture, hit Develop Settings and Sync Settings. You'll get your regular copy settings screen. You don't need to deal with transforms, and I have crop checked by default, but I didn't do any cropping because I wanted to get this thing done today. So I let this go, and you'll see after a few minutes it will roll right through. I'm going to do a very simple export and move these out as basically 2K files. You'll notice this is Export FB. I make a lot of things that I send out to Facebook. And what we found is if you have 2K on your longest side for Facebook, it doesn't compress as much. You end up looking better. Sure, this is important. Before you do an export, you got to realize about how many you're going to export. In this case, we're almost 2,000 files. So what you want to do is you want to go into your template editor and you want to make the sequence number a fixed 4-digit number. That way, if you sort in file name order, they'll also be in numerical order, which you really need for the next step. You click on the number in parentheses, pick the number of digits that you want. In my case, I wanted to go make sure it was 2K on the long edge and sharpen for screen. And for heaven's sakes, don't put a copyright mark. It's just silly. If you want to do it after you've got them all merged. It's not worth doing it here. It's just going to create more confusion. Now for me, after export, I pop Explorer so I can just look in the room and see when it's done. Now with this, 1900 pictures moved to 2K long edge, and they were originally 26 megapixel pictures. I believe it took about 2.5 hours, but I don't have to sit there and babysit it. It just gets it done. Before we start the next section, I want to tell you the strategy here. You've got a normal non-mainframe computer and you want to load 1900 pictures. Even though we've crushed them down, 2K on a side is going to end up being a 1.5 megapixel image per image. You've still got 1900, 2000 of these for 6 hours worth of photography. That's just too much to put your computer through at one time. So it's better to break this off in chunks. What I do is I break off 150 at a time. I push those together and save it as a merge of X to Y. I do that for all the pictures until I run out of pictures, and then I go back and merge them. And I'm going to show you that process. It'll be compressed here a little bit in time, but this way you can see what I'm doing. This is a basic merge. Alright, so now I'm in Photoshop. I've gone to File, Scripts, Loads Files into Stack. Now you can go browse. And I'm going to go to the actual folder where my stuff is. In this case, I stuck them under Nature, under Stars, and Trails with today's date. The date of the shoot, actually. And then all I'm going to do is I'm going to make a decent chunk of them. It actually will display better if you switch it to detail mode. It'll display more quickly, so you're not using graphic processor when you're displaying your files. And then, just like I said, grab 150 or so. I do it in 150 because it's easier to remember. You grab that section of files. When it's done, a little OK will light up. Do not click the attempt to automatically align source images. When you do that with Startrails, weird things happen. It'll try and bend your picture. It'll try and move things around. Let it load. You'll see in the lower right, eventually the number will clear out. When it clears out, we'll go to the next step. Alright, so the file's loaded. From there, once they're done, you'll know that the lowest number will show on top. You pick that by just clicking on it, left clicking on it. Go down to the very last picture in the bottom of the stack, hold Shift and click again. Then up above there, there's this little section where it says Normal. You want to switch it to Lighten. And what that'll do is that will stack all those pictures together. Screen will work for some images, but in my particular case, I've had a lot more luck with Lighten. You can try other things. Those are the best two I've seen for Startrails, depending on what your background depth is and what your color depth is. When you're done, hit Flatten Image and save this out. So in this case, I shot the first 150 pictures and squished them down. So I'm going to call this merge. I'm going to put it in the same place. I'm going to call it merge of 1 to 150. And I'm going to make 4-digit numbers. So you see I started at a 3 and then I caught myself. You use 4-digit numbers. Again, you're matching that structure just so you can help. If you have to get interrupted or do something the next day, you can easily see where you left off. All right, you're seeing me work my way through these. Now that we've got all this stuff, I'm on my last set here, which is up to 1932 before the fog got really, really bad. Again, I grab them, mark them all, lighten them, and I flatten the image, and I save. And I make this new file called merge. In this case, it'd be the last one, which was 1800 to 1930 something or other. All right. And if you can see now, look at the browser, you'll see they're all called merge up at the top. And they're all in order because I used that same 4-digit numbering system. So now I'm going to go and do the exact same thing, but with the merge files instead of the individual pictures. So again, load files in the stack, browse, but this time I pick all the merges. So see, basically I'm combining all these operations into simpler pictures. It loads them up, and because there's only 10 of them, it's nice and quick. And once again, we're going to wait for it to roll through, and then we're just going to connect them and lighten them. And what you'll see is this line that you have here will get connected with all the others. Now, occasionally I make a mistake and I realize my arc is too short. Oh, I forgot to select all the other pictures. There's no harm in doing it more than once. It's not really going to mess you up. Just pick them all with the shift key at the top and at the bottom. It'll pick all the ones in between, hit lighten. And now you've got these nice arcs. Now, what you're looking at, you think about this mathematically, this should make sense. Around the North Pole there on the left, I've got almost a semicircle, and that's because this was a 6-hour shot. Based on the Earth's rotation, if it went 24 hours, it would be an absolute complete 360. So 6 hours, a quarter of that, it's a little more than a quarter of a circle as you get closer to the center and less as you get out to the edge. Just the way it is. Now, how long was this duration for? I had 1930 pictures, and each one lasted 12 seconds. So when I take it, I divide out by 60 for minutes, I divide by 60 again, and you can see this is 6.4 hours of shots that I put together to make this star trail. That's why I keep saying six hours, you know, a quarter of a day, half of a night. But it ends up being a pretty nice effect. Depending on where you are, usually winter is better, late fall or winter where it's dry so you don't have so much clouds and fog. I did get some here because we were near freezing and we hit the dew point last night, but it wasn't until after 4 a.m. So the pictures there, I just deleted them and kept going. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and maybe this will help you find that there are easier ways than going out and spending $500 or $800 on some Starlight software when you can do the same thing in Lightroom and Photoshop, which you probably already have, or Camera One has something very similar. I'm just more familiar with Lightroom and Photoshop. I've used it for years. So I hope this helped. Like if you enjoyed it or learned anything from it. Please feel free to subscribe. I'm going to be trying to do at least one or more of these per week. At the same time, I'm also going to be starting a new section in this channel. I just started it about a week ago called Just for Fun, where I take silly things, just neat things to look at, and I video them. I think the next one coming up is sort of a takeoff on, if you've ever seen it, Oddly Satisfying, so I'm going to be doing that. That'll be, I don't know, maybe this weekend, maybe next week. Anyway, thanks for coming. Hope to see you next time.